4. The Naqshbandi Order. The Masters. The dervish school called Kaja Gan, Masters, rose in Central Asia and greatly influenced the development of Indian and Turkish empires. The order gave rise to many specialist schools, which adopted individual names. Many authorities regard this as the earliest of all the mystical chains of transmission. Kaja Bahauddin Naqshband, died circa 1389, is one of the greatest personages of this school. After his time it was known as the Naqshbandi chain, the designers or masters of the design. Bahauddin spent 7 years as a courtier, 7 looking after animals, and 7 in road building. He studied under the redoubtable Baba el-Samasi and is credited with having returned to the original principles and practices of Sufism. The Naqshbandi sheikhs alone have the authority to initiate disciples into all the other orders of dervishes. Because they never publicly adopted any distinctive dress, and because their members never carried on attention-attracting activities, scholars have not been able to reconstruct the history of the order, and it has often been difficult to identify its members. Partly because it is a tradition of the masters to work entirely within the social framework of the culture in which they operate, the Naqshbandis in the Middle East and Central Asia have gained the repute of being mainly Muslim pietists. How the order came into being. 3 dervishes went on the longest journey. When they returned, people said to them, "What helped you most to complete the journey, to make your way, to endure the privations, and to accomplish the return?" The first answered, "Cats and mice, because observing them in the ordinary world taught me the equal importance of stillness and activity." The second answered, "Food, because it enabled me to endure and to be understanding." The third said, "Exercises, because they taught me to be active and unified." The ignorant among the hearers tried to copy this advice slavishly. They were unsuccessful, but at least they took themselves, in reality if not in appearance, out of the way of the dervishes. The half-ignorant among the listeners said, "We will not strictly emulate, we will try to combine these principles." They were unsuccessful, but at least they took themselves out of the way of the dervishes, leaving them in peace, since they thought that they now possessed all the teachings. Then the dervishes said to those who were left, "Now we will show you how, correctly combined, the secrets and the most ordinary of things in this life may make it possible to achieve the longest journey. This is the teaching." It was in this manner that the order of the masters came into being. It is in this manner that the externalists and the inner people still behave. 3 visits to a sage. Bahauddin Naqshband was visited by a group of seekers. They found him in his courtyard, surrounded by disciples, in the midst of what seemed obviously to be revels. Some of the newcomers said, "How obnoxious! This is no way to behave, whatever the pretext." They tried to remonstrate with the master. Others said, "This seems to us excellent. We like this kind of teaching and wish to take part in it." Yet others said, "We are partly perplexed and wish to know more about this puzzle." The remainder said to one another, "There may be some wisdom in this, but whether we should ask about it or not, we do not know." The teacher sent them all away. And all these people spread, in conversation and in writing, their opinions of the occasion. Even those who did not allude to their experience directly were affected by it, and their speech and works reflected their beliefs about it. Some time later, certain members of this party again passed that way. They called upon the teacher. Standing at his door, they noticed that within the courtyard he and his disciples now sat, decorously, deep in contemplation.
This is better," said some of the visitors, "for he has evidently learned from our protests."
"This is excellent," said others, for last time he was undoubtedly only testing us."
"Oh, this is too sombre," said others, "for we could have found long faces anywhere."
And there were other opinions, voiced and otherwise. The sage, when the time of reflection was over, sent all these visitors away. Much later, a small number returned and sought his interpretation of what they had experienced. They presented themselves at the gateway and looked into the courtyard. The teacher sat there alone, neither revelling nor in meditation. His disciples were now nowhere to be seen. "You may at last hear the whole story," he said, "for I have been able to dismiss my pupils since the task is done. When you first came, that class of mine had been too serious. I was in process of applying the corrective. The second time you came, they had been too gay. I was applying the corrective. When a man is working, he does not always explain himself to casual visitors, however interested the visitors may think themselves to be. When an action is in progress, what counts is the correct operation of that action. Under these circumstances, external evaluation becomes a secondary concern." One way of teaching. Bahauddin was sitting with some disciples when a number of followers came into the meeting hall. Shah asked them one by one to say why he was there. The first said, "You are the greatest man on earth." "I gave him a potion when he was ill, and so he thinks I'm the greatest man on earth," said Shah. The second said, "My spiritual life has opened up since I have been allowed to visit you." He was uncertain and ill at ease, and none would listen to him. I sat with him, and the resultant serenity is called by him his spiritual life, said Shah. The third said, "You understand me, and all I ask is that you allow me to hear your discourses for the good of my soul." He needs attention and wishes to have notice paid to him, even if it is in criticism, said Shah. This he calls the good of his soul. The fourth said, "I went from one to another, practicing what they thought. It was not until you gave me a wazifa, exercise, that I truly felt the illumination of contact with you." The exercise which I gave to this man, said Shah, was a concocted one, not related to his spiritual life at all. I had to demonstrate his illusion of spirituality before I could arrive at the part of this man which is really spiritual, not sentimental. The successor. Zabid ibn al-Munawwar, the mystic of high attainments, died, leaving the people of the settlement in Balkh without a real teacher. From Turkestan, the venerable El-Sayyar, then a man of scarcely 40, was dispatched by Bahauddin to become the preceptor of this settlement. When El-Sayyar, blessings upon his innermost consciousness, arrived in Balkh and went to the Khankah, he found the deputy, Khalifa, sitting surrounded by his students, organizing the affairs of the community. He was assigned a place in the kitchens. Only one pupil recognized him as the successor, but El-Sayyar bade him be silent. "Here we are both of a lowly degree," he said. A month later, when the great Sheikh of Khorasan was visiting the Khankah, he was passing the kitchens when he exclaimed, "The real friend is here, and the unreal friends are everywhere else." Nobody understood this remark until a letter arrived from the Kaja Gan, addressed to El-Sayyar as the appointed successor. After that, he was treated with great honor. Azimzadeh, the pupil who had recognized the successor, in turn became the chief of the monastery. The most ancient masters. Bahauddin, in a reverie, cast himself back in time. He told a group of visiting seekers, "I have just seen and had companionship with the masters of the most ancient times, thought to be long dead." They said to him, "Please tell us how they appeared to be." He said, Such is your attitude towards the teaching that they would have thought you demons. Matters are such that, had you seen them, you would have considered them quite unsuitable for companionship with you. You would not be asking questions about them. Why I did that. One day, a man came to the great teacher Bahauddin. He asked for help in his problems and guidance on the path of the teaching. Bahauddin told him to abandon spiritual studies and to leave his court at once. A kind-hearted visitor began to remonstrate with Bahauddin. "You shall have a demonstration," said the sage. At that moment, a bird flew into the room, darting hither and thither, not knowing where to go in order to escape. The Sufi waited until the bird settled near the only open window of the chamber, and then suddenly clapped his hands. Alarmed, the bird flew straight through the opening of the window to freedom. To him that sound must have been something of a shock, even an affront, do you not agree? Said Bahauddin.
Indirect teaching. A disciple attended upon Shah Bahauddin Naqshbandi of Bukhara. After sitting in his assembly for some days, Bahauddin's chief disciple made a sign to him to approach the sheikh and speak. "I have come," said the man, "from Sheikh Ridwan. I hope that you will give me something." "From whom?" "From Sheikh Ridwan." Bahauddin asked the man to repeat what he had said, and then he asked him again and again, until the man was convinced that Naqshbandi was deaf and probably stupid. When this interchange had gone on for an hour or more, Bahauddin said, "I cannot hear you. I have not heard a word you have said." The disciple stood up and started to withdraw, muttering, "May God forgive you." Shah, no longer deaf, immediately said, "And you, and also Sheikh Ridwan." The heir of Qasr-i-Arifan. It is related that the king of Bukhara once sent for Bahauddin Naqshbandi to advise him on a certain matter. His message said, "An ambassador is coming, and I must have you with me when he is here for consultations. Please come at once." Bahauddin sent this reply, "I cannot come, since I am at the moment dependent on the heir of Qasr-i-Arifan and have no means of bringing it with me in storage jars." The king was at first perplexed, and then annoyed. In spite of Bahauddin's great importance as a sage, he resolved to remonstrate with him for his lack of civility. In the meanwhile, the ambassador's visit was cancelled, and so the king did not have to deal with him after all. One day, months later, the king was sitting at court when an assassin leapt at him. Bahauddin Naqshbandi, who had entered the throne room at that moment, jumped upon the man and disarmed him. "In spite of your discourtesy, I am indebted to you, Hadrat Shah," said the king. The courtesy of those who know is to be available when someone needs them, not to sit waiting for ambassadors who are not going to arrive, said Bahauddin. Bahauddin's answers. Many questions, one answer. I came to a city where people crowded around. They said, "Where are you from?" They said, "Where are you going?" They said, "In what company do you travel?" They said, "What is your pedigree?" They said, "What is your inheritance?" They said, "What is your bequest?" They said, "Whom do you understand?" They said, "Who understands you?" They said, "What is your doctrine?" They said, "Who has the whole doctrine?" They said, "Who has no doctrine at all?" I said to them, "What seems to you to be many is one. What seems to you simple is not. What seems to you complex is easy. The answer to you all is the Sufis." The Sufi who called himself a dog. Maulana Dervish, chief of the Naqshbandi order and one of its greatest teachers, was sitting one day in his zavia when a furious cleric forced his way in. "You sit there," shouted the intruder, "dog that you are, surrounded by disciples, obeyed by them in every particular. I, on the other hand, call men to strive towards divine mercy through prayer and austerities, as is enjoined upon us." At the word dog, several of the seekers rose to eject the fanatic. "Stay," said the Maulana, "for dog is indeed a good word. I am a dog who obeys his master, showing the sheep by signs the interpretation of our master's desires. Like a dog, I infuriate the interloper and the thief, and I wag my tail in pleasure when my master's friends come near. Just as barking and wagging and love are attributes of the dog, we exercise them, for our master has us and does not do his own barking and wagging." Cherished notions. Sadiq Hamzawi was asked, "How did you come to succeed, by his own wish, the sage of Samarkand, when you were only a servant in his house?" He said, "He taught me what he wanted to teach me, and I learned it. He said once, 'I cannot teach the others, the disciples, to the same degree, because they want to ask the questions, they demand the meetings, they impose the framework, they therefore only teach themselves what they already know.' I said to him, 'Teach me what you can, and tell me how to learn.' This is how I became his successor. People have cherished notions about how teaching and learning should take place. They cannot have the notions and also the learning." Naqshbandi recital. "But this is an old tale you tell," they say. "But surely this is a new tale you tell," some say. "Tell it once again," they say. Or, "Do not tell it yet again," others say. "But I have heard all this before," say some. Or, "But this is not how it was told before," say the rest. And these are our people, Dervish Baba. This is man. Sentences of the Kaja Gan. Rudbari. Heart to heart is an essential means of passing on the secrets of the path. Maghribi. Learning is in activity. Learning through words alone is minor activity. Khurkhani. At a certain time, more can be conveyed by distracting useless attention than by attracting it. Gurgani. The teacher and the taught together produce the teaching. Farmadi. Experience of extremes is the only way towards the proper working of the mean in study. Hamadani. Service of humanity is not only helpful to correct living, by its means the inner knowledge can be preserved, concentrated, and transmitted. Yasavi. Local activity is the keynote of the dervish path. Baki. Aesthetics is only the lowest form of the perception of the real. Andaki. Effort is not effort without zaman, makan, ikhwan, right time, right place, right people. Gajdawani. We work in all places and at all times. People believe that a man is important if he is famous. The converse may equally well be true. Ahmad Sadiq. The mark of the man who has attained is when he does not mistake figurative for specific, or literal for symbolic. Farnavi. Our science is not of the world, it is of the worlds. Rugari. Stupidity is to look for something in a place where untutored imagination expects to find it. It is, in fact, everywhere that you can extract it. Ramitani. Information becomes fragmented, knowledge does not. What causes fragmentation in information is scholasticism. Samazi. Man thinks many things. He thinks he is one. He is usually several. Until he becomes one, he cannot have a fair idea of what he is at all. Sokari. We send a thought to China, and it becomes Chinese, they say, because they cannot see the man who sent it. We send a man to India, and they say that he is only a Turkestani. Naqshbandi. When people say weep, they do not mean weep always. When they say do not cry, they do not mean you to be a permanent buffoon. Attar. A true document may contain 7 layers of truth. A writing or speech which appears to have no significance may have as many layers of truth. Khamosh. It is not a matter of whether you can learn by silence, by speech, by effort, by submission. It is a matter of how this is done, not that it is done. Kashgari. If you still ask, why did such and such a person teach in this or that manner, and how does it apply to me? You are incapable of understanding the answer deeply enough. Chaki. No matter where the truth is in your case, your teacher can help you find it. If he applies only one series of method to everyone, he is not a teacher, let alone yours. Samarkandi, Khwaja Ahra. For every trick or imagination, there is a reality of which it is a counterfeit. Al-Lahi. We do not live in the east or west. We do not study in the north, nor do we teach in the south. We are not bound in this way, but we may be compelled to talk in this way. Al-Bukhari. The way may be through a drop of water. It may equally be through a complex prescription, ordering. Zahid. When you see a Sufi studying or teaching something which seems to belong to a field other than spirituality, you should know that there is the spirituality of the age. Dervish. When it is time for stillness, stillness. In the time of companionship, companionship. At the place of effort, effort. In the time and place of anything, anything. Samarkandi Aminiki. Pass from time and place to timelessness and placelessness, to the other worlds. There is our origin. Simaki. If you take what is relative to be what is absolute, you may be lost. Take nothing rather than risk this. Sirhindi. Do not talk only of the 4 ways, or of the 72 paths, or of the paths as numerous as the souls of men. Talk instead of the path and the attaining. All is subordinated to that. Masum. Essence, or dhat, manifests only in understanding. Arif. But it may develop independently of this. These men called daravish, dervishes, are not what you think them to be. Think therefore of the real. It is something like what you think it to be. Badauni. You cannot destroy us if you are against us. but you can make things difficult for us even if you think you are helping. Jan-i-Janan. Man can partake of the perpetual. He does not do this by thinking he can think about it. Delavi. We spend a space in a place. Do not put up a sign to mark the place. Take rather of the material which adheres to the place, while it is still there. Kandahari. You hear my words. Hear, too, that there are words other than mine. These are not meant for hearing with the physical ear. Because you see only me, you think there is no Sufism apart from me. You are here to learn, not to collect historical information. Jean Fichan. You may follow one stream. Realize that it leads to the ocean. Do not mistake the stream for the ocean. Miracles and tricks. Bahauddin once received a mendicant Qalandar who offered to perform miracles to prove that he was a representative of the greatest of all mystical masters. El-Shah said, "We are here in Bukhara, the unique community, whose faith is neither produced nor sustained in the smallest particular by extraordinary happenings called miracles. But it is of value for you to perform before the whole assembly of dervishes, and also all who come to see us." He accordingly arranged for the next festival day to be set aside for the performance of the strange Qalandar. For a whole day, the mendicant performed miracle after miracle. He brought the dead to life. He walked on water. He caused a severed head to speak, and many other wonders. The Bukharans were in an uproar. Some of them stated that this man must be a disciple of the devil, for they did not want to adopt his way of life or to credit him with any beneficent powers. Some of the peripheral supporters of El-Shah declared themselves satisfied that a new sun had arisen, and tried to make arrangements to leave for wherever his monastery might be. Some of the newer disciples of El-Shah begged him to perform similar miracles, to show that he was capable of them. Bahauddin did nothing for 3 days. Then, before an immense concourse of people, he started to perform what can only be called miracles. One after another, people saw things which they could hardly believe. They saw, heard, and touched such things as were not even imagined in the traditions about the wonders of the greatest saints of all time. Then Bahauddin, one after another, showed them how the tricks were carried out, and that they were tricks. "Those of you who are seekers of juggling, follow the way of juggling," he said, "for I am at more serious work." Liability. One night, a thief, trying to climb through the window of a house which he intended to rob, fell because the window frame broke, hit the ground, and broke his leg. He went to court to sue the owner of the house. This man said, "Sue the carpenter who put the window in." The carpenter said, "The builder did not make the window aperture properly." When the builder was called, he said, "My fault was caused by a beautiful woman who was passing while I was working at the window." The woman was found, and she said, "I was wearing a beautiful gown at the time. Normally, nobody looks at me. It is the fault of the gown, which was cunningly dyed in variegated stripes." "Now we have the culprit," said the judge. "Call the man who did the dyeing, and he shall be held responsible for the harm done to the leg of the thief." When they found the dyer, he turned out to be the husband of the woman. It so happened that this was the thief himself. Falsity. One day a man went to a Sufi master and described how a certain false teacher was prescribing exercises for his followers. The man is obviously a fraud. He asks his disciples to think of nothing. It is easy enough to say that, because it impresses some people, but it is impossible to think of nothing. The master asked him, "Why have you come to see me?" "To point out the absurdity of this man, and also to discuss mysticism." "Not just to gain support for your decision that this man is an impostor?" "No, I know that already." "Not to show those of us who are sitting here that you know more than the ordinary gullible man?" "No. In fact, I want you to give me guidance." "Very well. The best guidance I can give you is to advise you to think of nothing." The man immediately withdrew from the company, convinced that the master was a fraud. But a stranger, who had missed the beginning of these events, and had entered the assembly at the exact moment when the sage was saying, "The best guidance I can give you is to advise you to think of nothing," was profoundly impressed. "To think of nothing? What a sublime conception," he said to himself. And he went away after that day's session, having heard nothing to contradict the idea of thinking of nothing. The following day, one of the students asked the master which of the men had been correct. "Neither," he said. "They still have to learn that their greed is a veil, a barrier. Their answer is not in one word, one visit, one easy solution. Only by continuous contact with the teaching does the pupil absorb, little by little, that which gradually accumulates into an understanding of truth. Thus does the seeker become a finder." The master Rumi said, "Two men come to you, one having dreamt of heaven, the other of hell. They ask which is reality. What is the answer? The answer is to attend the discourses of a master until you are in harmony." Studies and Caravans. Sheikh Rugari was visited by a man who pleaded long and earnestly to be accepted as a disciple. The sheikh talked to him about his life and his problems, and then sent him away, saying, "Your answer will be sent to you in due time." Then the sheikh called one of his senior adherents and said to him, "Go to the house of such and such a man, the would-be disciple, and without mentioning my name, offer him a secure and profitable employment in your caravan trade." Soon afterwards, a message came from the would-be disciple to the sheikh. "I beg to be excused for not waiting upon you, since fortune has recently decreed that I be given an excellent position with one of the largest merchants in this town, and I must give all my time to this in the interests of my family." Sheikh Rugari, on several occasions, correctly divined that visitors to his presence were there only because they had suffered disappointment in their lives. This is not a rare example of his actions in this manner. The Inner Exercises. Each perfected man is in a sense the same as each other one. This means that, correctly attuned through the energy of the school, a disciple can come into communication with all the great ones, just as they are in communication with each other, across time and place. We have renewed the substance of the tradition of the ancients. Many among the dedicated dervishes have not done this, and we must leave them to what they want to practice. Do not engage in disputation with them, you to your way, and I to mine. The duties and practices of the school form one whole. The truth, the manner of teaching and the participants form one hand, in which the ignorant may see only the dissimilarity of the fingers, not the combined action of the hand itself. Bahauddin, Naqshbandi. On your religion. Throughout the dervish literature, you will find us saying repeatedly that we are not concerned with your religion or even with the lack of it. How can this be reconciled with the fact that believers consider themselves the elect? Man's refinement is the goal. and the inner teaching of all the faiths aims at this. In order to accomplish it, there is always a tradition handed down by a living chain of adepts who select candidates to whom to impart this knowledge. Among men of all kinds, this teaching has been handed down. Because of our dedication to the essence, we have, in the dervish path, collected those people who are less concerned about externals, and thus kept pure, in secret, our capacity to continue the succession. In the dogmatic religions of the Jews, the Christians, the Zoroastrians, the Hindus, and the literalist Islam, this precious thing has been lost. We return this vital principle to all these religions, and this is why you will see so many Jews, Christians, and others among my followers. The Jews say that we are the real Jews, the Christians, Christians. It is only when you know the higher factor that you will know the true situation of the present religions, and of unbelief itself. And unbelief itself is a religion with its own form of belief. Ahmad Yasavi. The Palace of the Enlightened. Reasons for the founding of a school. The path, order of the masters, derives its substance in unbroken succession from the earliest times. It maintains its connection, in a parallel way, with both the ancients and the contemporary teachers, by direct communication of being. Now many externalists have been confused by the fact that there are different orders and formulations in our path. They are the more perplexed because, although the adherents of one school esteem, revere, and follow one teacher and his methods, they may well join another one at some time or other. The reason is not far to seek, if you know how to seek it. The answer is in the ancient aphorism of ours, "Speak to everyone in accordance with his understanding." The task of the teacher is to teach. In order to teach, he must take into account the present preoccupations and fixed ideas of his pupils. He must, for instance, use the terms of Bukhara with a Bukharan, and the terms of Baghdad in Baghdad. If he knows what he is teaching, he arranges the outer form of the means of teaching it, like building the physical shape of a school in accordance with this. Also involved are the nature and descriptions of the disciples, and their potentiality. Take an example in musical assemblies. We do not attend them, nor do we employ music. This is because for our time and in our position, there is more harm than good in it. Music, heard in the right way, improves the approach to the consciousness. But it will harm people who are not sufficiently prepared, or of the correct type, for hearing and playing it. Those who do not know this have adopted music as something sacred in itself. The feelings which they experience while indulging in it they mistake for sublime ones. In fact, they are using it for the lower purpose of arousing sentiment, emotion which is no basis for further progress. Dervishes join the order most suited to their inner nature. They remain with their teacher until he has developed them as far as possible. After this, they may go or be sent to another teacher in order to participate in the special exercises which he may offer. This is because there may be a side of them which will be benefited by this specialization. In the path of the masters, we follow the bases of the dervish work. Some of our exercises are used in one way, some in another. Some are reversed, because they do not apply to this place or this time. Similarly with all other schools. It is for this reason that you will find here masters who have the robe of permission to enroll disciples in all the orders, but who work with this community in accordance with its needs, based on the original science upon which all other forms are based. Our school is founded on the verifiable and impeccable authority of our predecessors in unbroken and documented succession of spiritual pedigree. Little do you know, however, how little these externals, which satisfy you by our moral repute, count in comparison with the fundamental truth of experience, which is our invisible, powerful inheritance. Bahauddin, Naqshband.